Well. G'day everyone, welcome to Inside Rugby with Mark. My name's Mark, I'm a Kiwi rugby fan who's just sitting here astonished about that game between Toulouse and Leinster. It's just finished minutes ago. I'm not going outside to the park today to do my video, it's too hot. We've got over 40 degrees Celsius right here in Cancun today. So you're gonna have to listen to me sitting inside. But what a game it was, so much to unpack. So let's get into it. So g'day everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're a regular viewer of mine here on Inside Rugby, thank you all very much for your support. If you're a new timer here, I actually always do my videos in a park across the road, but because it's too hot today, I've decided to stay inside in the air conditioning and have a chat to you through this way. Now what a game it was, Tottenham Hotspurs Stadium, a sunny afternoon in London. Matthew Carley was the referee in this game. Not going to talk any more about him in my review. You can do all that in the comments. And what a game it was. Absolutely fantastic stuff. It felt like a test match before it even got underway, didn't it? There was intense rivalries on both sides, and I just couldn't wait for this game to get underway. In the first couple of minutes, we saw that to and froing a little bit between the two teams, but I thought that Toulouse had the better of the first couple of minutes. They were putting their pressure on Leinster and getting down inside the Leinster half. They didn't look like they were going to score at that stage, but they were just getting more possession and territory in the first couple of minutes of the game. Now I spoke about in my preview for this game that I thought Toulouse were going to try and put little chip kicks over the top of the Leinster defence to try and push back that rush defence. And in the third minute we saw them do that. Intermac put a little nice chip kick over the top of Osborne and he turned the Leinster defence around. And I thought this was a really good strategy, and if they were going to keep this going, they might have some rewards. But we didn't have to wait too long for the first points in the game. It came the way of a penalty to Toulouse. Osborne was pinged for not releasing the tackled player in the 4th minute of the game, and Blair Kinghorn, the Scottish international fullback, stood up for Toulouse and got the first points for them. So Toulouse went out to 3 points to nil after 4 minutes of the game. And then just a couple of minutes later, Leinster got pinched again for being offside in a ruck, and it gave Kinghorn the opportunity to get his second penalty within as many minutes. So Toulouse jumped out to 6 points to nil after 7 minutes of the game. So a couple of interesting things happened next in the game. The first one was from the kickoff straight away for Leinster, and Archie didn't go for the ball for Toulouse for some reason, and it gave Leinster the opportunity to come through. They didn't clean it up, but it gave Leinster a little bit of an opportunity to get on the front foot. And this was the first time in the game that Leinster appeared to be going forward and getting some time in the Toulouse territory. And when they did, they looked dangerous. They started putting a couple of phases together. And I always thought throughout this game, before it even started, that as long as Leinster were going to bring their clinical precision to this game, then they were going to have good success against this Toulouse team. But we saw early on in those first 10 minutes of the game that the Toulouse defence was really up for it in this game. They were putting some massive hits on the Leinster players, and it was going to be an almighty battle. That was obvious from very early on in the game. And in the 11th minute of the game, Leinster had their first opportunity with an attacking line out 5 metres out from the Toulouse line, but unfortunately they botched it. They dropped the ball and knocked it on. Toulouse were playing the advantage, but they ended up botching it up as well. So Matthew Carley had no choice to bring the play back and give the opportunity to Toulouse, who then cleared it from their line. So Leinster let themselves down on that occasion. They weren't clinical with that attacking opportunity when they were deep into the Toulouse 22. Well, we'd always talked about at the beginning of this game that Ross Byrne's performance was going to be pivotal to perhaps the outcome of the game. In the 12th minute, he did something fairly genius. He rocked back on his left foot, saw an opportunity across the field, put in a kick pass opportunity that went out to the wing. Dan Sheehan was there, of course. Who else would you find on the wing for Leinster? And it was a narrow miss for Sheehan being able to get the ball back into play and creating a potential try for Leinster at that stage. So very good awareness of the game from Ross Byrne on that occasion. He put in a great kick, just a little bit too hard, and Sheehan wasn't able to control it in the way to get it back in for Leinster. We had to wait until the 17th minute of the game before there was more points scored, and this time it was Leinster's opportunity to go on the board for the first time, and it came about from a problem from the Toulouse defence. They rushed up and got offside too quickly. Matthew Carley pinged them for that, and it was Ross Byrne's opportunity to have his first kick goal, which he was successful. So after 17 minutes, the score was back to 6 points to 3 in favour of Toulouse, and it was a very, very tight game at the stage of the game. As the game carried on, for me, I saw Leinster looking more and more dangerous. There was just something about them in this first half as it was unwinding, though they seemed to have a lot of passion. Their energy was there because a lot of these players have had some time off, of course, and you could see that that energy was really running through them, and I was wondering whether that was going to be a big factor later on in the game. But Leinster put a number of series of phases of play together. They got close again to the Toulouse line. They looked threatening on a number of occasions, but the Toulouse defence was really, really good. They came up into their face, and their forwards in particular were creating problems around that inside channel, and where we usually see Caelan Doris working with Gibson Park to create those darting little runs, the Toulouse forwards were there and they were chopping them down. There was some great work by Jack Willis and crew who was in there, and also Rumart at number 8 for Toulouse were doing a fantastic job in defence around that particular area of the field. And an example of that defence came in the 23rd minute when Leinster were deep on attack. They looked very, very threatening, but Intermac and DuPont went in together and made a great steal at that particular stage of the game and won the ball, won the turnover for Toulouse while Leinster were looking threatening. So that's one of the examples I was talking about with Leinster not being as clinical, but again, Toulouse's defence was really up in their face, and it was great work from both of those two players at the breakdown on that occasion. We got to the 28th minute of the game and Toulouse were on attacking, looking dangerous. DuPont put the ball through. James Lowe picked it up and went to do a clearing kick, and DuPont charged it down. Unfortunately for Toulouse, it didn't bounce off to a player who could have gone in and scored a try. But again, DuPont was the man on the spot, charging that kick down from James Lowe. Then in the 29th minute of the first half, we saw a Leinster attack coming out of their own half. The ball came to Dan Sheehan. He did a Usain Bolt impersonation, ran 40 plus metres towards the Toulouse try line. Didn't have the speed, unfortunately, to get there. And then he got pinged for not releasing the ball in the tackle when he was put to ground. So unfortunately for Leinster, another situation where they weren't clinical in finishing off that particular play and recycling the ball. They gave the ball away, and Toulouse were able to clear the ball close to their line. And then in the 33rd minute, we saw another piece of DuPont magic. He was down inside his own half. The Toulouse players were getting the ball back from a breakdown situation. DuPont quickly got the ball and kicked a 50-22 opportunity. It was going at absolutely lightning speed. It bounced one just inside the touchline and went out inside the Leinster 22 for a fantastic 50-22 to Toulouse. There's not much this man can't do. That one was kicked off his right foot. We'd got to 35 minutes in the game. There hadn't been any tries scored, and that surprised me a lot because I thought this game was going to be full of tries with the talent that both of these teams have, particularly in their backlines. But it was a very cagey and tight affair. As I said, it was like a test match game, this game, and it wasn't until the 35th minute when an opportunity came Toulouse's way again through a penalty they received, where Blair Kinghorn came up and kicked another penalty goal. So as we approached half-time, Toulouse were in the lead 9 points to 3, and something told me that things were going to change around in the second half of this game. Surely it couldn't stay as tight as it was in the first half. Then in the 39th minute, another opportunity for Blair Kinghorn to put Toulouse further in the lead, but unfortunately for them, he missed that penalty attempt. And there was a bit of a mishap for Toulouse in the final minutes of the first half. They actually gave Leinster the opportunity to kick the ball again, get down into their half where they got a penalty, and Ross Byrne was able to get a penalty kick over after 41 minutes of the first half. So Leinster were able to claw the score back a little bit to 9 points to 6 at half time. It was a close encounter, but I'll tell you what, I was already thinking that the second half was going to open up. I couldn't see how Toulouse were going to be able to keep going in the second half as they were. They were having to put an enormous amount of work in defence. Their tackle count was very high. Both teams were giving away a similar amount of penalties because Matthew Carley was going to be very, very tight on the breakdown area in this game, and that's what happened in that first half. But it was a great first half of rugby. I thought it was an extremely intense first half. It was warranting of a final, and both teams were playing it as such. But I have to give a lot of credit to Toulouse in that first half. Their defence was absolutely on point. Every time Leinster looked at taking a lot of attacking phases together, which they did do, they weren't able to score a try, and that was to the reward of the Toulouse defence in the first half. So if I was going to award any points for that first half on the state of play, it would have been to the Toulouse defence. I thought they were outstanding. We saw a couple of magical things from Dupont in that first half, not just on attack, but also in defence. He's just as huge in defence as he is in attack. And I was very impressed with Leinster, the way they were trying to open the game. We saw James Lowe in that first half do a couple of really good runs. And we saw the Leinster backs just trying to run the ball at every opportunity. Hugo Keenan was in the play. That game against Ulster last week, for him coming back from injury, was a good thing. It gave him a bit of run in his legs, and he looked like he was full of running early in this particular game. Larmour had a couple of good runs on the wing. He looked dangerous, but it was around Osborne and Henshaw where it wasn't quite clicking in this game for Leinster, and I felt that Gary Ringrose was probably being missed as that real linchpin in the centres for Leinster, because when they did look dangerous, they just didn't have that final weapon that they needed in that first half. But hey, things were probably going to change in the second half. Let's find out what happened. Well, if you happen to be following me on Twitter or X during this game, I did write at halftime that I felt Leinster were going to roll over the top of Toulouse in the second half. And the reason I felt that is I just felt that Leinster had more energy in this game. They were looking more physical. They were looking more speedy when they got the ball. And I thought that was going to really tell with plays of opportunity of breaking up the game in the second half. And that's what I thought was going to happen. On the other side, though, Toulouse, if they could keep that defence going for the remainder of the game, of course, they had their bench to use still. They were still going to be in this game. And as I said in my preview of this game, I said any team that's able to score 30 points against Leinster has a very good opportunity of winning the game. So we got stuck off into the second half. The first change came from Leo Cullen 44 minutes into the game. He pulled the ripcord, and we saw Will Connors coming off and Josh van der Flier coming on the field. And that made an immediate impact. And I'm not saying Will Connors had a bad game. He played pretty well, I thought, up until that stage. But we all know the talent that is Josh van der Flier. And when he came on, we noticed an immediate change in the ability of the Leinster forwards going forward, and particularly winning some key ball in that breakdown area. And that's exactly what Josh van der Flier brought to the early stages of the second half. After 47 minutes of the game, Ross Byrne got another opportunity from a penalty after not releasing the ball from Toulouse. He slotted it over, so we were back to 9 points all, and it couldn't be even any tighter. Now, I don't think many people would have put a bet on that after 50 minutes of this game we wouldn't have had a try in the game, but that's exactly how this game was playing out. So we had still 30 plus minutes to go in the game, and I thought the game was still going to open up and we were going to see some tries. I just wasn't sure at that stage where it was going to come from and who was going to make those breaks. I felt the scrums were a bit of a mess in the game so far. There was a lot of stopping and starting from Matthew Carley, the referee, and we just weren't getting settled scrums. And I think the point of that was both scrums were trying to get some form of dominance. Both scrums were very good, and there were some big boys trying to do some big work. So if you're a real scrumming fanatic, I'm sure you would have enjoyed it, because there was a lot of intensity going on and a lot of power play going on with technique in those scrums. But unfortunately, because they were breaking down, we were seeing a lot of disruption around that particular area of the play, and Matthew Carley wasn't standing for it, and it resulted in quite a few penalties coming to both teams as a result of that. And one of those indiscretions came in the 57th minute of the game, and it came to the way of Toulouse. So Blair Kinghorn had another opportunity to have a penalty kick at goal. He was successful, and Toulouse went out to a tender lead of 12 points to 9 after 59 minutes of the game. We got into the last quarter of the game and Leinster put on some great phases of play. They were finally rewarded with a penalty kick, and Ross Byrne had an opportunity to bring the scores level, and he did again. So we were at 12 all at that stage, and there was still 18 minutes left in the game. I thought it was still going to open up eventually. And then in the 68th minute of the game, we saw one of the plays of the game. It was a fantastic opportunity for Toulouse down the left side of the field. It looked like Lebel was going to go in and score a try, but Jordan Larmour came over for Leinster and made sure Lebel went out into touch in the tackle. It was a fantastic tackle by Larmour. He was really saving Leinster's bacon on this particular play, and it was just one of those extraordinary try-saving tackles that really kept Leinster in the game at that 69th minute of the game, and we saw Toulouse on attack again. They were doing some really good work, and Leinster got penalised again. So Thomas Ramos, who was on the field now, came up and had a kick for them. It was successful, so 15 points to 12. Toulouse went out with about 12 minutes left in the game. Were Leinster going to be able to come back? That was the big thing we were all looking for. I still thought Leinster were in this game. They were full of running still. They looked like they had the energy to go the full 80 minutes in this game. And I expected them at some stage to be able to open up this Toulouse defence. Then as we went into the last 10 minutes of this game, we saw some extraordinary things starting to occur. The first one was in the 73rd minute. Leinster were on attack, and it was that man Dupont who went in yet again to make a fantastic steal of the ball, and he was able to save it once again for Toulouse. So as I said before, Dupont was putting in some magnificent work in defence in this game. And then in the 75th minute, the next passage of play, it went all Leinster's way. It came from Frawley, who put up a very high kick, a high bomb kick. It went close to the Toulouse 22, and Intermac made a bit of a meal of it, knocking it on and giving Leinster the opportunity. So Leinster took that opportunity. They put a whole series of phases together, getting close to the Toulouse line, ended up getting a penalty from that section of play, and it was Frawley who came up to gate the kick at goal for Leinster, and he was successful. So the game at that stage was back to 15 all. It was very tight as we went into the first or the last few minutes of the game. So there was 3 minutes left in the game. It was anyone's to win. Leinster went on attack. They had an opportunity to get a drop goal. The ball came out to Frawley. He had a go at it, but he just pushed it to the left, and unfortunately, which would have been a match-winning goal for Frawley, slipped by the post, and it was still game on for Toulouse to be able to try and win this game. So Frawley, well, we got to the 81st minute of normal time, and the ball finally came back on the Toulouse side. Intermac got the ball, he turned around, he kicked it over the dead board line, and that was the end of full time in this first period of play, and what an intense struggle it had been. So the scores had ended at 15 points all after normal time. We played 83 minutes of normal time in this particular game with the addition we had in the first half, and you couldn't separate these two teams. For me, I thought Leinster were looking better when they had the ball in hand and heading towards the Toulouse line. For me, the Toulouse defence was better though. They were absolutely incredible throughout this game, and the likes of Mifu and Flamand were doing big jobs in the middle for the Toulouse team, particularly on those inside channels. And we didn't see many darting runs at all in the first period of play from Gibson Park today because of that defence was so tight around the ruck. He was having to spread the ball out wide, and it was going to Byrne and Osborne and through the Leinster backline. So that really cut down on an opportunity for Leinster in this game, was to use those inside channels, because I felt the inside defence from Toulouse was too good. Crew, Willis and Rumart at number 8 were just having a fantastic game in defence for Toulouse. So this game was going to go to extra time, and that meant 2 halves of 10 minutes. And anything could happen, and everything did happen. And we only had to wait 1 minute and 10 seconds of extra time, or the first half of extra time, and we had a big decision in this game. James Lowe was sent from the field with a yellow card after doing what was apparently a deliberate knock-on. The referee has determined that he deliberately knocked the ball on as Toulouse were passing it out. They looked like they were going to create a dangerous play, and the ball hit Lowe's hand and went and deflected the ball out over the touchline. So he was deemed to be deliberately knocking the ball on, and he was sent from the field for 10 minutes. So that gave Toulouse an advantage numerically on the field. Were they going to be able to put this to good use? And the answer to that question was yes, because just 2 minutes later we saw a fantastic running break from the Toulouse backline. The ball came out wide to the left-hand side to Choco Barras, who did a fantastic draw pass out to Labelle on the left wing. He had 40 metres still to run to the goal line of Leinster. He was able to do that without getting tackled or put out of play. And it was a fantastic try to Toulouse. Don't forget, Leinster were down to 14 men at that stage, but Toulouse still had to make that opportunity come into reality, and they did so, and they absolutely were clinical at that stage of the game. Thomas Ramos had a rather difficult conversion. It wasn't right on the touchline, but it was out wide, and he was able to get that kick over. So a 7-pointer in the end for Toulouse at that stage of the game, and after 4 minutes of the first period of extra time, we had Toulouse out to 22 points to 15. 6 minutes into the first period of extra time, we saw that little genius come into play again. Leinster were down on attack, but Toulouse turned over the ball. Dupont got the ball, and he put in another fantastic 50-22 kick, which gave Toulouse the momentum to get back down into the Leinster half. He was just playing absolutely fantastic, Dupont field, and getting two 50-22 kicks in this game were absolutely fantastic, especially when his team needed it from Anton Dupont. So another indiscretion from Leinster gave Toulouse another opportunity for a penalty kick at goal. Thomas Ramos came up and got it, 25 points to 15 at that stage, a 10-point lead as we were coming towards the end of the first half of extra time. Was it going to be enough for Toulouse? Leinster still looked full of running, and there was about to be a big decision in this game that could probably change it until the end. And this big decision came right on the 10-minute mark of the first half, so we're almost out of time in the first half. Toulouse were in control of a breakdown situation, and Richie Arnold, the Australian lock who'd come on for a replacement for Toulouse, went barreling into one of the Leinster players on the edge of the breakdown, hit him right in the head, and Matthew Carley had no choice but to send Richie Arnold off the field with a red card. It was a stupid move by Arnold, and he went barreling into that breakdown situation where Toulouse already had the ball under control. They were going to win the ball out, but he just went in there for an extra clean out and took out the head of, I think, Cian Healy, who was at the bottom of that ruck. So from that particular play, it gave Leinster the opportunity to run the clock a little bit more in the first half of extra time. They ran that down brilliantly. They got back onto attack, put a lot of pressure on Toulouse, and as a result of an attacking line-out, they got a maul going, a pick and go. It came out to Josh van der Flier, who darted for the line, and he went over and scored a try by placing the ball on a little blade of grass just over the try line. But that's all you have to do. The TMO took a few minutes to work it out in conjunction with the referee, but Josh van der Flier had scored that try for Leinster, brought them right back into this game, and the conversion was successful as well. So all of a sudden we went from 25 points to 15 back to 25-22 as we turned around for the second half of extra time in what was turning out to be an extraordinary game of rugby. Now for me, whoever was going to score in the second half of extra time first was going to have some real momentum in this game, and unfortunately for Leinster, they gave away a couple of penalties in the first 3 minutes of that extra period, that second half of extra time, and Thomas Ramos was able to get both of those kicks over. Now that put the score out to 31 points to 22 with just 6 minutes left on the clock. So there were 6 minutes left in the game. Leinster had to score twice. They had Toulouse down to 14 men, and they had to start putting a lot of pressure on Toulouse, but the clock was not running in their favour. So they did get some attacking phases put together. They got close down towards the Toulouse line, but strangely the ball came out to Frawley, and he decided to go for a drop goal. Of course, they had to score twice. He thought that was probably the best way of narrowing the margin of points, and hoping in the last minute or two that Leinster were going to be able to score a converted try. But unfortunately for Frawley, the drop goal attempt missed. It gave the ball back to Toulouse to restart with, and now the clock was really in Toulouse's favour. I'm not too sure whether that was the right decision from Frawley. It looked like Leinster were having an overlap as the ball came out to the left-hand side of the field where he was standing. He made that split-second decision, and of course if it had gone over, he could have been a hero and really got Leinster back into this game. Unfortunately for him, it didn't, and it gave Toulouse the emphasis within a few minutes of the end of the game. And despite having the rest of the ball in the game, Leinster just couldn't get over the Toulouse line. They put on a lot of pressure. They came back inside the 22 of Toulouse, and it looked like they were going to go close. Alalatoa went for a big barging run that got them close. The ball came out to Gibson Park. It went left, but they weren't able to get over for the try that they much needed to put some pressure on Toulouse in the final seconds of the game. The ball was finally put out wide. It went over the touchline, and Toulouse had won this amazing Champions Cup final rugby game. And what a game it had been. The sixth star in Toulouse's legacy in the Champions Cup, and what a fantastic game of rugby it was. I have to tip my hat to Toulouse, because I did think all the way through this game that Leinster were going to come back. I always thought Leinster were going to score some tries, and they were going to run over the top of Toulouse in the second half. That didn't happen. Toulouse were too good across the field when it came to defence in this game. They were clinical enough to score that try when they needed to. They went close on another occasion, but it was really a game of defence that won this game for Toulouse, and also Anton Dupont's brilliance, because both in offence and defence, Dupont was everywhere for this Toulouse team, and it just shows how important he is to French rugby and how important he is to this Toulouse squad. But it was a team effort, and we saw some fantastic performances from Toulouse across the park today. I thought Ramos was brilliant when he came on. Kinghorn was very settled in the first half. Not only did he kick well, but he was also making some very good decisive runs from the back and bringing the ball back. But he made some really good gains in that first half. But there were also some other great performances from Toulouse. Their forwards, I thought, were magnificent in this game, particularly in defence. As I've mentioned, Crew, Willis and Rumart were working all day long. Flamand and Mifu were huge for the time they were on the field as well. They put in a really gutsy effort for Toulouse today. But it was that inside defence for Toulouse that I think really won this game. They cut out their option of Gibson Park and the inside flankers for Leinster being able to find some easy ground. We didn't see too many bullocking runs from Caelan Doris today. He had a couple, but he didn't really make those runs that made a difference to set up that second and third set of phases for Leinster, unfortunately for them. And then when the ball did come out wide, I felt Osborne and Henshaw were just not as clinical as we've seen them in the past. And that's where it broke down for me for Leinster today, because Lamour and Lowe and Keenan were extremely good in their respective plays. So unfortunate for Leinster, but I think on the day that the defensive effort from Toulouse, but also their ability to better get the points when they counted, whether it be through the boot of Thomas Ramos or Blair Kinghorn, they were there at the end and they had enough points. Ironically, they scored more than 30 points today, and that was enough to beat Leinster, as I have been saying throughout a number of my videos. But it was a fantastic game of rugby. I'm still feeling intense after it, and I'm just making this video straight after the game. So let me know in the comments what you thought of the game. I'm sure if you're on the Leinster side, you're disappointed. But hey, hang in there. You've still got the United Rugby Championship to go. And it was a brilliant game of rugby today, no doubt about it, from both sides. It was a very intense battle. And at the end of the day, we always say if the game of rugby can come out on top, then that's the main thing as a rugby supporter. And that's exactly what happened, I feel, in this game today. If you're on the Toulouse side of the supporters, let me know what you thought of this tremendous win from your team. Some of the players that stood out from you, let me know as well in the comments. I'd like to hear from all of you on what you thought about this magnificent game of rugby. Okay, I'm going to be back soon with some more videos on rugby from across the world. We've got some amazing games coming up. Of course, we've got the English squad being announced tomorrow from Steve Borthwick for the summer series, and they're heading down to my own country of New Zealand to take on the All Blacks. That's going to be a fascinating series. and you're going to be able to follow all the action of that series right here on my channel at Inside Rugby. So if you like my content, and I promise I'll be out in the park again soon for the next videos when it gets a little bit cooler here in Cancun in Mexico. So hit the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up if you're a rugby fan, because that Investec Champions Cup Final was an extraordinary game of rugby, and I'll go away and have a little bit of a cool down now, I think. I'll be back again really soon in the next episode. Until then, stay well, stay safe everybody, and it's time to say adios from beautiful Mexico. Bye for now.